Hey everyone, Thyworm here. If you're a fan of Final Fantasy like me, you might want to try out Edge of Eternity. Let me tell you why. And if you enjoy these videos, give it a like, maybe subscribe, I appreciate it a lot and it really helps the channel grow and get noticed. Edge of Eternity is a classic JRPG. I mean, just look at the protagonist. That is JRPG hair right there. Any JRPG should have a good story, so let's just start with that. Edge of Eternity is set in a rather peaceful land, Harion. The grass is green, the environment's full of life, it has vibrant and lively colors. The scenery truly is a sight to behold, honestly. The land holds magical crystals, studied by mages and disciples and priests, which provide magical powers and allow the population to thrive. 30 years ago, an alien race, the Archelites, visited Harion, and they struck a deal with the natives, and for 30 years they lived in peace. The Archelites brought new technologies, but as time progressed, they were more and more interested in the magical crystals. Harion, however, refused to give up these crystals, and in response the Archelites started a war. The crystals proved to be more powerful than the technologically advanced weaponry from the Archelites. The aliens were on the brink of losing the war, and to turn the tides, they released a biological weapon on Harion called the corrosion. Normally, you'd think maybe that people don't corrode, and that's true, but in Edge of Eternity they do. It's pretty much a plague, spreading throughout the land, killing many citizens. One of the affected is the mother of our two protagonists, Selene and Darian. Selene is a priestess, a student of magical power, studying the crystals, and Darian is an army veteran, fighting the Archelites on the battlefield on the other side of Harion. They combine forces to save their mother, first and foremost, but incidentally may end up saving much more than that. The story is well told, I feel, with decent voice acting and a bunch of characters that each have their own personality. Especially the bond between the siblings is well crafted, with Selene being the more playful of the two, causing all sorts of trouble, and Darian the more down to earth, but also the more emotional one, who has seen battle and how brutal the world can be. The decisions made don't always make a ton of sense, but most of the time they are in line with the personalities of the main characters. At some point in the story, you figure out, for example, that you require a Neckaroo to progress, a chocobo basically, or a mount if you have no idea what a chocobo is. Darian sees the Neckaroo at first as a tool to reach a destination, where Selene adores the animal for what it is and wants to play around with it, breed more Neckaroos and run an entire Neckaroo farm, which you can do, by the way. Contrary to what you might expect, this JRPG is not made by the J, but by the F, the French, in particular by Midgar Studio, based in the south of France, consisting of only 8 developers. The name Midgar is in my view a reference to the name of the major capital in Final Fantasy VII, where Shinra has their Mako reactors, or in other words, Disc 1. Looking at the logo of the game, I've seen these sorts of logos before, where one of the main characters is portrayed or a major event in the game. Rinoa and Squall in Final Fantasy VIII, Luna Freya in Final Fantasy XV, and Goku in Final Fantasy XIV Online. Stylistically, very recognizable logos. It's no coincidence. This is a game heavily inspired by Final Fantasy, and if you enjoyed those games in the past, especially the earlier versions like 7, 8 and 9, then this may be right up your alley. While I am drawing comparisons, I am only doing that to give you a frame of reference. This isn't just a clone. It is an original game with roots heavily in true classic JRPGs. In Edge of Eternity there are 8 chapters of story. I've completed 4 of those and I'm already playing for 20 hours. I'm taking it easy though, I'm gathering stuff, I'm crafting and doing side quests. This is a super chill game in the good sense of the word. I'm really enjoying the overall vibe of the game, exploring the world, talking to the citizens and just wandering the plains. Curious if I find maybe a special enemy, if my Neckaroo digs up something important, or if someone is in need of assistance. The main quest has you finding a cure for the corrosion, but it's not a straight path to an antidote, of course. During your travels you meet many other characters, some of which will join your party. You get progressively stronger by completing quests and fighting monsters, but also by gathering materials for crafting. There's a decently well fleshed out crafting system which allows you to craft magical gear you can wear. There are specialized weapons that are very powerful which you can craft after gathering all the required components and the recipes. Sometimes you only get those components by doing certain tasks, so upgrading your weapons are a small quest in itself basically. You can also improve on earlier designs, and weapons have 4 schools or types if you will, each with a different added effect. You need to unlock the recipes to craft them by either questing or spending gold at a vendor. I found it a very interesting and rather intuitive mechanic actually. Your weapon levels up just like you by gaining XP. They do more damage and allow for more crystals to be socketed in those weapons. These crystals come in a wide variety of colors and types, matching the sockets available, and provide you with stats and abilities. A ruby crystal may provide strength, haste, and a fire ability, depending on the weapon. Darian, carrying swords, gets a fire strike, while Celine, being a mage, gets a powerful fire spell. By mixing and matching crystals, weapons and gear, you can create builds, if you will, by focusing on offensive stats and spells or more defensive ones. Where Edge of Eternity sets itself apart is by the combat and the strategic choices you have to make over there. Going back to Final Fantasy for a bit, the Final Fantasy series evolved over time. One of the major departures was letting go of turn-based combat. Donkey probably is very happy with that, and playing Final Fantasy 15 is sort of refreshing. The Final Fantasy 7 remake takes it even one step further. Edge of Eternity, however, does not follow that trend. Turn-based combat is still very much the name of the game, but they also introduce a hex-based grid with tiles, and your characters and the enemies are in those tiles. This is rather important and rather interesting. Darian with his swords is a melee character and he can only attack enemies that are close to him. Celine, on the other hand, can weave her spells across several tiles. This makes for very tactical combat. In your regular fights with trash mobs, this whole mechanic is a bit obsolete. However, in boss fights, it plays a pivotal role. You need to make sure you make the right decisions, position your party properly, kill enemies in the correct order, and maybe activate some of the various objects on the battlefield like lasers and ballistas to gain an advantage. I've died several times on bosses actually because I just didn't employ the proper strategies, and halfway through the fight the boss was bashing in Celine's skull, who as a mage can't take a beating. Here also the builds come into play and how you distributed your stats. Making Darian tanky and capable of taking a punch will prove very valuable in boss fights. I kinda wish the combat with trash mobs was faster paced, because that's the downside of turn-based combat of course. It takes a while and it's definitely noticeable, but the boss fights make up for it I feel. It's also worth noting that you're not doing all that much fighting. You're not grinding it out or anything like in some of those JRPGs. The game XP also comes from quests, from side quests and bounty hunts. There's no real need to take on 30 additional fights with monsters just to keep up with level requirements. Also, random encounters don't exist. It is you who determines if you walk up to an enemy to engage them. Finally, the game introduces energy, which goes down after each battle. I feel it really doesn't add all that much to the game, but at some point you should go to sleep and refill your energy. You can sleep at a lot of places however, so this was never really an issue for me. One more thing, in combat the camera is usually fine, but in elevated terrain and in some other situations it can be extremely wonky. It tends to go underground for example, which means it's pretty much under the level, and it's noticeable when you perform certain animated actions like casting a spell. Most of the time though it isn't an issue, but when it occurs it's kind of obvious. Finally, I want to talk a bit about the graphics and sound. You've watched the footage, this is just me playing the game, and I feel this game is absolutely gorgeous though. I mean, doesn't this look pretty? I think it looks very pretty. The game offers various options. Here you see everything cranked up to super ultra or something in 1440p, and it runs super smooth as well on a 2080 and an i7. This game supports 21:9 aspect ratio and even 32:9 aspect ratio. I have one of those things and yeah, it works, no issues. Clearly it won't run as smooth anymore as you're doubling the pixels basically, but I still run around in 40 FPS most of the time, which for 32:9 is really good. There's controller support as well. I'm playing this on a controller, full chill mode after all those ARPGs, and it works like a charm. I've played with mouse and keyboard too, no problems there either. Another thing that stands out in this game is the soundtrack, adding to that beautiful ambience of Edge of Eternity. It is done by Yasunori Mitsuda, the composer for Chrono Trigger and the Xenoblade Chronicles. The tracks are just a work of art, fit the scene so well, and I want to make you listen to just 5 minutes of tracks, but that would completely kill the audience retention rate, which actually matters. So Google that stuff and trust me, it's stunning and captivating music. I sometimes just walk around a little bit in the world and take it all in. Finally, the price, it's not that expensive. 30 euros for the game on Steam, which is half the price of a AAA game here in the Netherlands. I'd say that is a good deal actually, because this feels like a AAA game. It is very polished, lengthy, and a rock solid RPG. I hope you enjoyed the video, and for now that is it. Thanks for watching, see you soon, love you all, bye bye.